This video is going to be about 5 beginner mistakes I made in self-publishing one of my book series, and what I did and what I plan to do about it. Most of these mistakes were ones that were not even on my radar at the time they were made. Let me give you a little context. As I came close to retirement, I decided to write a novel or two. I chose to self-publish for many reasons that I've gone over in other videos, and I won't go over those now. But I will say, to this day, in spite of all the mistakes I've made, I still consider self-publishing a good fit for me. The purpose of this video is to reveal what happened so that other newbie writers or self-publishers can learn from my mistakes and also know where there could be some hidden landmines. When I first got the idea of writing a novel, I did research for about a year. I read several how-to books on every subject under the title of writing a novel and self-publishing. I also watched hundreds of videos on the subject, and like most people, all the information I came upon, especially in video format, was great advice, but none of it was curricularized. When you self-study online, you take in just a steady stream of random information, and then we're all left to sort it out ourselves. That's how free education works on the internet. So this list here was the chronology I pieced together as being the proper one on how to write and publish a book. First, you write the book, then you create and purchase an amazing book cover, then you write a great book description and a great blurb. You pick the categories at Amazon, you look for ARC readers and beta readers and try to get early reviews. Post the novel to all of the free sites like Goodreads, BookFunnel, Story Origin, and even subreddit groups. And lastly, be willing to give away your book as a first marketing strategy, or be willing to pay for ads. It's either one or the other. So mistake number 1. In this big cloud of random information I took in, I got ARC readers and beta readers kind of mixed up, or thought they were too closely related, but they are two completely different animals. Beta readers oftentimes read books very early in the process, before the book is even finished sometimes, and they give you early feedback. This is a great idea if you're not sure about your characters or you're not sure if the plot is good enough. Let's face it, in the beginning, it's hard to think your book is a masterpiece when it's your first one. At least it was for me. There is a definite high-level purpose in having beta readers. They are worth their weight in gold. However, here is where I made the terrible mistake and found out the hard way about this particular landmine. I offered my vampire book, my first one, Darius, A Vampire Story, as a beta book, but it had not been finalized, professionally edited, or proofread. Now, in the ad copy for the link to download, I clearly posted it was a beta copy and that it hadn't been edited. However, once a book is downloaded to an e-reader, some people don't read it that particular day. They might not read it for a year or two. No one is going to remember that this book was only a beta copy. And the second mistake I made in this particular area was that I didn't put anything in the book itself. For example, I didn't put any explanation paragraph before the first chapter. I didn't add a watermark. I assumed my explanation about the beta copy that invited the download was enough. Well, when I finalized the book and released it, I got slaughtered in early reviews. I assumed as a new author that maybe it wasn't that good. However, several of the reviews referenced typos and or grammar mistakes. And when I went to the finalized copy to, of course, correct them, they didn't exist. The first time this happened, I just thought the reader was maybe a bit crazy. But after this happened several times, it was only then that I realized that I had released hundreds of these beta copies that now lived on people's e-readers. And for some reason, there are a lot of readers who take typos and grammatical errors very personally. And it seems to trigger them, and their reviews are more like rants. So poor Darius got all beat up in the early reviews. So mistake number 2 was what I did about the problem, which was pretty much nothing. I wish I could say that I recognized the gravity of this mistake right away, but I didn't. I just thought that some people had read an earlier copy, and that's a shame, but what can I do about it now? I didn't realize that there were probably hundreds of these copies out there. I had no list of who I sent these early copies to. Now, I also didn't realize that this series was going to be 5 books. So in hindsight, what I should have done was pull the first 2 to 3 books and re-release them as a second edition. This is what I'm going to do in January of 2025 because that's when I'll be releasing the 5th book in this series. So doing nothing about it was the second mistake. Now I have a hard and fast rule. I never give beta copies in download format. I now only pay for beta readers, and I send them the manuscript in Microsoft Word format. I also include verbiage that it is a beta copy and hasn't been edited or proofread yet. So let's talk about mistake number 3. Goodreads is probably the largest single pool of avid readers and book lovers out there. But Goodreads can be a tough crowd for new writers. This is where Darius's bullying first started. If I had to do things over again, I would not have focused on Goodreads as a first place to release my books, even after they were fully edited and proofread. Unfortunately, many of the videos I watched during that first year talked about how great Goodreads was and how helpful it was in finding beta readers and ARC readers and launching a book. To be honest, I never found any true beta readers or ARC readers there. I found mostly people who like to download free books. So I would just caution newbies that Goodreads is not the only game in town, and you may need some boxing experience before you enter that ring. And that's all I'm going to say about Goodreads. Now, Goodreads was purchased by Amazon, and they used to have a promotional giveaway that you could pay for $119. At least that's what it was at the time I used that service. However, I found the reviews very harsh or even snotty at times. I had much better experience giving the books away with Free Booksy and even the Fussy Librarian for less than $119. I also got better reviews using BookFunnel and Story Origin free book giveaways. As long as you don't put your books into Kindle Select, you can still give them away on these websites. Mistake number 4. The Amazon categories. I didn't realize that the categories on Amazon had a hierarchy to them. It may have been because we were originally allowed to put each book into 10 categories. I had watched a video by author Chris Fox about writing to market, And he was explaining about drilling down in the categories and writing to a specific subcategory and how much easier it would make marketing. Now, he writes science fiction, and in particular, I believe he writes military science fiction. But at the time he said this, I thought writing to a specific market just to make marketing a little easier would be awful. It would be like pulling an assignment out of a hat and having to produce a book about it. I'm just not that type of writer. So I let that concept float away in the wind and just picked 10 categories that seemed like they would be a good fit for my books, and the rest of the concept of writing to market was lost on me, at least at that time. I moved on to other things. Over time, pretty recently really, I did figure out that the categories are hierarchical. And Chris Fox's advice came back to me. What he was trying to say was that the new authors could focus on subcategories in order to dominate in those smaller categories in their quest to climb up to number one on the bestseller list. In other words, you can rise to number one in a subcategory way faster and easier than rising to the top 10 in the highest level romance category. So let me just go to Amazon for a minute to show you what I mean. Okay, so here I am at Amazon.com, and I'm over here in books. So this is the romance top category, romance, and all of these are subcategories. But if you look at the first level of subcategories and you go down to historical and click in this one, then there are also these subcategories. And let's go. And this one is the mystery, thriller, and suspense. So let's click on the first mystery. Okay. And you have all of these to choose from. Let's go to the second mystery. Okay, and this is other subcategories that you can choose from. And let's go here to literature and fiction. So these are all subcategories. And if we come down here to women's fiction, so under women's fiction, we have all of these subcategories. So that's what I mean about finding these smaller categories that are much easier to climb to number one on the bestseller list. So the time to think about the categories is before you even plot out or write the book. Once you have a plot idea, that's the time to look at the categories and think about where the book would fit and what you can tweak about the storyline to fit into a subcategory or a less competitive category, or maybe even two categories. Can you make the story, which might be a romance, happen in the West? So it can be a Western romance. Can you put this story, instead of being in present day, in the olden times to make it a historical novel? Or even better, can you put it in a specific historical period? The time to think about categories is right after you know you have a workable plot line. In looking back, I could have tweaked a few of my books to fit them more easily into subcategories without changing the storyline much at all. Mistake number 5 requires a little explanation. My inspiration for my vampire series was the old Dark Shadows soap opera from the late 1960s and 1970s. I never watched it as a kid, but everyone I knew did. I didn't watch it only because I had to walk too far to get home from school in time, and I missed like 20 minutes of the 30-minute show. This vampire series, like most soap operas at that time, was melodramatic, and being a gothic and supernatural story, the storylines were completely crazy. But I loved the show anyway. What I didn't realize at the time I watched it was that these crazy storylines came from real books. They just seemed crazy to me as they played out one after the other on this soap opera. In fairness to the writers of Dark Shadows, they had to produce 5 shows every week without fail, and I'm not even sure they got a summer vacation. So, with limited knowledge of the whole vampire genre, I went on to write my vampire book series. My vampire owns and operates a funeral home and keeps a bevy of 3 women to supply the blood he needs. He normally picks up runaways from the train and bus stations, but he winds up falling in love with the daughter of a wealthy, influential family in Newport, Rhode Island. There is also a monastery of monks that live on the opposite side of the cemetery that Darius also owns. No one in the area has any idea they are living next to a vampire, and there are some supernatural events that start happening around the Belmont funeral home, one of which is a mobster from New York looking for his daughter who was last seen with Darius. That's all I'll say at this point about the plot lines. That's all we need to go forward here. Now, my series does follow the classic rules on vampirism with a tweak or two. However, there is also a little subtle tongue-in-cheek narrative in the story, which was more prevalent back in the 1960s and 70s. So how does all of this fit into mistake number 5? Well, there's no category for tongue-in-cheek vampire stories. Also, 50 years have passed since this show ended, and a lot has happened to the vampire genre in that time. First, there was Anne Rice and her books and subsequent movies, which are all dead serious, and there's no tongue-in-cheek humor of any kind. I only read the first book, and it was steeped in darkness and despair. And now, because I read for enjoyment, the level of despair was too much for me, so I never read the subsequent books. Then there were the Twilight movies and TV shows of True Blood and the Vampire Diaries, which were targeted to a much younger group of people. Some of the backdrops were high school or college, and there was a rise of the vampire hunters. So my book is a vampire book for adults or young adults who are not interested in high school or college anymore. But there's no Amazon category for vampire books for adults. And my books also have no vampire hunters. None of these changes to the vampire genre were on my radar when I wrote my book. I thought books were judged on how well they were written and if people, quote, like them, close quote. Then I came upon 2 videos on a channel called Tristan and the Classics. And those 2 videos changed everything. It changed my whole viewpoint and my trajectory and sent me on a new journey where I learned so much information that is not only helpful, but I consider it crucial for newbies. The first video was entitled, What is Gothic Literature? And the second one was called Teach Yourself Gothic Literature. I have both of these videos posted below, and I hope you take the time to go and watch them. So as I realized that my books were not really fitting well in any of the vampire categories, I went on to create my own Teach Yourself Gothic Literature course based on Tristan's suggestions. This journey helped me to understand more about writing to market and about reader expectations in particular, both of which I now feel are crucial in self-publishing. I actually took Tristan's suggestions about the self-study program one step further, which I'll go into in the next video. So, to sum things up, this is the new chronology that I will now use and suggest to beginners, that this will be more helpful to you regarding what comes first and then next in writing a book. First, you find an idea for a workable plot line. And once you have that, next you do the genre research specifically for reader expectations. Then research Amazon categories to see what's available. And then you plot out and write the book with writing to market in mind. That's when you come to the point where you make the amazing Amazon cover, write the great description and the great blurb. And if you're using beta readers, you follow the hard and fast rule. Then you have it professionally edited and proofread, and then still be willing to give away the book as a first marketing strategy. Now, I want to leave you with a visual on my new hard and fast rule on beta copies or R copies, early copies of any kind, really. If they are beta copies, only give a limited number of copies out. 2, only give beta copies out in Microsoft Word. Add a watermark saying beta copy into the manuscript and never allow it to be downloaded to an e-reader. For R copies, only give out R copies after editing and proofreading. Put the R copy on the title page just to be sure, and be sure to leave a direct link to give you a review on Amazon. So thanks for watching, and I hope to see you in the next video or videos about my Gothic literature study.